Hey everyone, welcome back. It is April, and so I am doing another installment of GPU Price Watch 2025, taking a look at GPU pricing so I can offer you my advice on whether you should buy GPUs or not. The advice last month was do not buy because prices were way too high, but have things changed? Have things improved? The answer is yes, a bit, but you probably still shouldn't buy a GPU right now.
Excellent!
Today's video is brought to you by the Paul's Hardware store on paulshardware.net, the only official source for Paul's Hardware merchandise. Tantalizing t-shirts, brilliant beer sets, high-quality hoodies, and more, all featuring the classic thumbscrew for tasteful and refined viewers, or the 8-bit thumbscrew for tasteful and refined viewers who hate curves. New designs are added sporadically and at random, so head over to paulshardware.net and get some of that sweet, sweet merch right now. Or not right now, after you watch the video. Either way. So let me give you the TLDW version right at the beginning. We now have an expanded chart for April because we've added April pricing next to March, and that gives us a bit of perspective to look back on. I've also added this column here where we can see a bit of green, which is slightly optimistic. That's the lowest price change from last month to this month, and we can see a downward trend for a lot of the GPUs that we're looking at. However, if you still look at this column, which is price difference versus MSRP, we're still in the red by and large. A couple quick notes on how this data was gathered before we dive in to take a closer look. I'm using PCPartPicker to source my pricing information. I'm focusing on US prices, but if you do take a look at PCPartPicker, you can adjust to look at pricing in other countries. And then I'm looking at both the lowest verifiable GPU that you can buy online right now, as well as the average of the cheapest 10 listings available if there are 10 listings of a given GPU to be spoken of. And just as a reminder, if you're checking out actual pricing for any given product, that there are third-party sellers on sites like Amazon and Newegg, so pay attention to where your item is shipping from and who it is sold by, because there are plenty of unscrupulous marketplace sellers who have no problem doing stuff like listing a package as delivered and signed for even though nothing arrived, resulting in some pretty poor ratings. And I personally would not buy from a third-party seller that has a rating below 80 or 90%. So in particular, if you see a price listed that seems too good to be true, double check the seller before you place your order, because there are plenty of scammers out there. Okay, now we're gonna run down this list. We have RTX 40 series and 50 series cards. We've added the 5060 Ti 8 and 16 gig, although there don't seem to be listings for the 8 gig quite yet. And then down at the bottom, we have AMD Radeon listings. They're in the mid to upper range, because that is what I'm focusing on for these videos. People want to buy some of the newer and fancier cards that have come out, say, in the past year, and not be forced to buy something that's like 2 or 3 plus years old, like you have to do with some Radeon RX 6000 series deals that are out there. These GPUs would be suitable for a gaming PC that can do higher end PC gaming. We're talking 2560 by 1440 resolution or better, with high variable refresh rate option like 144 Hertz or better. So you need a higher end GPU in order to push frame rates in a lot of newer games to meet those resolution and refresh rate requirements. The 4060s were never very positively reviewed because they didn't offer much bang for the buck. It's also worth noting that NVIDIA has stopped producing RTX 40 series GPUs. They've switched everything over to the RTX 50 series, so that's why the 40 series pricing has never been significantly discounted. NVIDIA played a very careful game that they might have done too well at, where they tried to limit the RTX 40 series inventory leading into the 50 series launch so that there would never be an excess of inventory to drive prices down, which devalues their product, which is why GPU pricing is so high, which is part of the reason why I'm doing this video series. Anyway though, in April, the cheapest 4060 8 gig is $343, which is a $43 markup over MSRP, with the only bright spot being that it's not as bad as it was last month, with the lowest price coming down by $9. The 4060 Ti is available in both 8 gig and 16 gig versions, much like the 5060 Ti, although with the 5060 Ti, you should definitely get the 16 gig version and not the 8 gig version. For the 4060 Ti, I grouped the 8 gig and 16 gig together. Once again, our lowest price has come down a little bit, from $550 down to $545. Again, not much to speak of in terms of deals. We're still $145 over the MSRP. And if you did want to go for a 16 gig 4060 Ti, which you shouldn't right now, it's $612 was the cheapest option for one of those. Now with all these 40 series cards over on PCPartPicker, there are some listings still available, but there aren't a ton. And you can kind of tell, here's the 4060 Ti, that the stock is starting to dry up more and more for these GPUs. 4070 as well. Like, oh my gosh, has anyone ever actually bought a 4070 for $2,500? I sure hope not. The MSRP was supposed to be $500. Last month, the lowest price was $780. This month, likely due to that stock becoming less and less available, the price has gone up by $55. So once again, we have a horrible do not buy rating, even worse than usual, as we have a 167% price versus the $500 base. The 4070 Super 12 gig was a pretty decent deal at $600, and even better when the price had come down a little bit. Once again, we have a silly markup though, $262 over MSRP, with $862 being the lowest absurd price that we could find. And while that is $27 less than it was last month, it's still nothing to get too excited about. The 4070 Ti Super is another one that's just absurd in terms of what is actually available to buy on the market, because they're all $1,300 or more. This is one of the handful of cards on the list that did get worse this month, with the price going up by $7. Only a $507 markup versus MSRP, or 163.4% of what it should cost. The 4080 Super was supposed to replace the 4080 at $1,000 instead of the 4080's initial price of $1,200, which is why I'm not even bothering to list the 4080 non-Super. But no good news here. Again, the lowest price is $1,700 or a $700 markup. How about that RTX 4090 though? The holdouts who were like, no, I'm not gonna pay $1,600, I'm not gonna pay $2,000, I'm gonna wait. And that, yeah, I don't know if, like, there was a point where the 4090 was I don't want to say reasonable, but was at least selling for around its MSRP of $1,600. Here again, we have a slight silver lining because the lowest price for a 4090 is down by $225 versus last month, but that's still more than a $1,000 markup. And I think the only reason people might still be interested in this is because the 5090 is even more ridiculously priced, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. We had two new entrants this month. The 5060 Ti 8GB and 5060 Ti 16GB were both announced and launched by NVIDIA last week. NVIDIA casually only sampled the 16GB model, which does perform much better than the 8GB model. 8GB is a seriously limiting factor for gaming, especially for a card that you're going to pay upwards of $400 for. The sad thing is the 5060 Ti 16GB at $430, which is supposed to be its MSRP, would totally be like a buy recommendation right now. But unfortunately, about 5 days after launch, when I am gathering this data, the price has gone up by about $80, making the cheapest model $510, an 18.6% markup. Here's a quick look at the PCPartPicker listings you can see for the 8GB version. There are plenty of them listed, but none actually for sale. Then when we filter out for just 16GB models, there are 3 of them listed for sale, including that $510 model. Oh, wait, I thought it went out of stock. But hey, there it is, MSI Ventus $500 RTX 5060 Ti. I actually got a screen cap of this webpage because I was like, I bet it's gonna be out of stock by the time I film, but it's not. I also double checked over on Amazon for 5060 Ti. I'm actually searching for 8GB, but it's only showing me 16GB models. Because again, there aren't any 8GB models currently for sale, at least that I found listed online. There are some in stock over on Amazon, but again, super overpriced. These are gonna be sold by third-party sellers. Techie Store, are they reputable? Gosh, all of these third-party marketplace sellers seem to have some major issue with customer service or returns or something like that. Almost as if the major retailers would like to treat customers this way, but they know it would tarnish their reputations. So they created this marketplace system so they could have less reputable sellers sell shady products or mark them up to scalper pricing. But oh, it's not Amazon doing that or Newegg, it's the marketplace seller, so they're the bad guys. But here's at least where I can make a somewhat hesitant buy recommendation. If you're in a situation right now where you really need a graphics card and you can't wait and you need something that's on the newer end of things and you don't want to go fishing around in the secondary used market, then I would say the 5060 Ti 16GB or the 5070 12GB are the least marked up from MSRP right now. And while I would still say try to hold off for something that is less than $500 at least for a 5060 Ti, or even ideally less than $600 for something like a 5070, these two GPUs are probably going to be your best option right now. The other thing you're going to notice is that there are lots more of these available, and I think that's one of the things that is starting to drive the price down a little bit. The 5070s are in production, the 5060 Ti's are in production, they're being sent to manufacturers, more of them are coming to market. That is creating more supply that's starting to fulfill the demand, and that is why we're starting to see some slightly better prices trickle down this month. The one thing that I did happen to note was that the 5070, which is supposed to be a $550 MSRP, seems to have a new base price in the US, which is $610. That happens to be $550 plus 10% or so, which happens to be the base tariff amount that's being applied to graphics card, which of course is just being added onto the GPU price as a markup. So So hooray, we here in the US get to pay additional taxes for graphics cards in 2025. Isn't that fantastic? Specifically of note is this MSI Shadow, which was on sale for $550, actually briefly available about 8 or 9 days ago. This is now marked up to $610. Likewise, this white version of the MSI Ventus was $600 and now it is $660. 10% markup. Wow, amazing how that lines up. Continuing down the 50 series though, we can see more green here. So that is again a positive move in the right direction and something that's more likely to continue to happen with the 50 series because it does have more inventory coming in versus the 40 series where I believe they're just selling off inventory that is already on hand. But of course, anything above the 5070 has at least a 20% markup, starting with the 5070 Ti, which has the lowest currently available one, $900. Really? Really $900? And yes, that actually is the price, but it is a Prime members only price, which is part of Amazon's push, I guess, to say, look, we're reserving some of these so people can actually buy them. All you have to do is pay for an Amazon Prime subscription. Amazon's now using GPUs to help sell Amazon Prime subscriptions. Fantastic. Anyway, we're still $150 marked up over the MSRP, although that did come down by $70 in the last month, so that's cool. The 5080 16 gig is at plus $320. Easy math there since it has a $1,000 base MSRP. So this one's still, I think, way too marked up to recommend. Although again, that lowest price did drop by 180 bucks. And yeah, Amazon's doing the same thing with the 5080 that they're doing with the 5070 Ti. So let's move on to the 5090. The 5090 is just, man, it's that Halo tier card, so it has even more demand because it has the crossover usage with AI thanks to the VRAM buffer and the amount of cores that it has. So there are just no good prices for the 5090. I feel bad for anyone who really had their heart set on one, especially if you had your heart set on a Founders Edition. Cheapest FE model is $5,925 right now. That's almost 3 times what it's supposed to cost. But anyway, the cheapest one is $1,363 marked up. That is down $637 versus the lowest price one last month, which was $4,000. So again, that is somewhat optimistically moving in the right direction at least. But that then brings us to AMD's cards. AMD has a handful of RX 7000 series mid to upper tier cards that seemed to dry up and go out of stock everywhere and then prices were way too high. There does still seem to be a few of those trickling in alongside the RX 9070 and 9070 XT. But if I were judging NVIDIA versus AMD and their ability to get more GPUs onto the market and into the hands of buyers over the past month, NVIDIA would definitely be winning there. There are lots more NVIDIA GPUs available close to the MSRP, somewhat reasonably priced, than there are any AMD Radeon cards. So I really feel like this is a huge missed opportunity for AMD. They should be pumping out RX 9070s and 9070 XTs. And who knows, maybe they are ramping up to do that. It takes several months between someone higher up at AMD saying, hey, make more of these, to more of them actually being available on the market. And that is simply because things take a while to get through the supply chain. But that said, let's quickly run through these. The RX 7800 XT was a solid buy for quite some time at around $500. It is no longer that at closer to $600. The lowest price last month was $570 and that's gone up by 30 bucks to $600. Don't buy a 7800 XT right now. Strangely enough, the 7900 XT and XTX both seem to have additional inventory that's trickled into the market in the past month. The lowest priced 7900 XT dropped by about $64 down to $830. That does put it below the MSRP, but do note that the 7900 XT always had a terrible MSRP. I consider the MSRP of the 7900 XT to actually be more like $800. So I still think this isn't necessarily the greatest buy. The 7900 XTX meanwhile had an MSRP of $1,000. It does have a 24 gig frame buffer and it does have a good amount of rasterization performance. It's still tough to say whether or not this should be recommended just at the MSRP with no change. $4,000, but if you need a lot of VRAM and if you're doing crossover stuff that uses a lot of VRAM and a Radeon card will meet your needs, then I would say this is a better deal than most of the higher VRAM capacity 50 series and 40 series cards. With the possible exception of the 5070 Ti 16 gig, that'd probably be your closest competitor to a 7900 XTX right now. But again, you get 24 gigs with the XTX versus 16 with the 5070 Ti. Rounding things out, the 9070 16 gig should be $550 and it is $710 plus $160. or roughly a 30% markup. Again, the only bright spot here is that that price is down $118 versus last month. And a similar story with the 9070 XT. It should be $600, it's closer to $900. That's a really dumb huge markup, almost 50%. Again, the only bright spot is that we're down $47 versus last month when it was $940. Can now be had for $893. But I would still not buy it for that price. It should be $600. And again, just reality checking, that 7900 XTX is available straight from Newegg for $1,000. I guess you get Monster Hunter Wilds as well. And also just reality checking the Radeon 9000 series pricing. And this is, I think, one of the more frustrating things to me. A lot of the NVIDIA marked up scalper priced cards are being sold by marketplace sellers who you would somewhat expect to be scalper pricing. This RX 9070, which has a $550 base MSRP, and this is an Asus TUF model, which is not overclocked. This should be an MSRP model, or maybe like a $20 markup or something like that. Newegg is selling directly this $550 value graphics card for $710. And I find that to be fairly ugly because we need more advocates for better consumer pricing for GPUs right now. We don't need one of the largest retailers who sells GPUs in the US to be marking up stuff on their own. And here's where I will give just the teeny tiniest bit of credit for NVIDIA right now, which is that they do seem to be pushing retailers to at least have something close to MSRP for the cards that they're selling, versus the Radeon RX 9070 and 9070 XT cards seem to have shameless $150 to $200 markups coming straight from the retailers. And AMD, if you're watching this, please do something about this. Please hold retailers accountable to sell the cards that you say are going to cost a certain amount at the prices that will cost that amount, even if it's just a principle thing. Like anyone standing on principle right now in 2025, I want to give a big hug to, because that's how things are right now. But to sum up this chart, overall, things are still not in a good situation right now. The price difference versus MSRP, pretty much across the board, is still ridiculously high. But that said, we do have some positive changes versus last month. We do have some prices seeming to move in the right direction. And my hope is that after some of the launch hype wears off, and after some more inventory and supply can start spreading and be made available in the market, that we will see this trend continue. And I will say the most positive thing for me right now, all things considered, is that there is a somewhat reasonable buy with an RTX 5070 12 gig for around $600. And I know that's not the best, but it's better than it could be, so I'm hoping that these trends continue, and I hope that you guys have enjoyed this video. If you did, I'd love to hear your feedback, so leave me a comment in the comment section down below. I'll also post links to PCPartPicker and some of the GPUs that I am recommending right now in the video's description, so check those out. There's also a link to my store at paulshardware.net, where you can help support the channel by getting yourself some awesome merch like t-shirts, hoodies, beer sets, and more. paulshardware.net is where to go for that. So thank you all for watching. I'll be coming back next month to see how prices have changed again, so hopefully we'll see you then. I've got lots more content in between then and now as well, so we'll see you all in the next video.